Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Cindy said he may be in a faculty meeting. He wasn't sure. Allison, is there something wrong with that, you think?
I wasn't sure. It just kept saying waiting for host, but then I quit the application and then it came back.
Hadn't started. That you are waiting to be at a faculty candidate breakfast at 8 o'clock. So I'm kind of
Whew. Yeah, those searches, they take up a lot of time.
and they get plopped right in the middle of everything else.
Yep.
How are the rest of you? How are you, Chris? I've seen the other ones and everyone but Chris and Stacy recently on modeling meetings. It doesn't mean the rest of you are unimportant, but I feel like I get to talk to you guys more rarely. I hope I'm not too noisy. I'm in a coffee shop, which was the only place I could get to after the restaurant that had internet.
Oh.
It's like I am just figuring out how to do today, a little at a time.
I don't know, I'm good. I'm in the weeds on this program that I'm running in Chicago, where we provide solar panels to homes between 80 and 120% of area median income. And so I'm like really in the weeds on the program day-to-day administration of that. So my last hour was just filled with a call of like, okay, so is it too much money to do a program, like to do a project where the roof needs to be changed, but in order to get to the roof or in order to do structural repairs, you have to go through drywall. And we're like, it's very in the weeds, very.
So that's what the weeds look like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the little details of that navigation.
Yeah.
I feel like
we want to be as inclusive as possible on this project. Like,
yeah.
But then also it's like, but we also, you have to balance that with being a good steward of federal funding, and you have to balance it with, yeah, I don't know, feelings among team members like, well, this person's getting way too much money from this job. Like, I'm trying to, I don't know, trying to be inclusive and get as many homes as possible outfitted with solar at a great price of free in as little time as possible, but it's really hard.
Do you feel like it's going well overall?
I do. We've been at it for a year, and after a year of designing the program, getting a ton of applications, and just the timeline of working with solar vendors in particular, we have one home, which feels like a huge milestone. It feels slow, but it's not. We have a home that's been like complete. They have solar, it's been turned on, the system is energized. So like that's a big deal to go from not having any funding to having a program with program
Mhm.
rules and guidance and eligibility and completed solar projects. It's kind
And
of one
then,
of the
yeah,
things
and then somebody that followed those rules. Amazing.
yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, that's my update.
So I don't know if Brian will be, I don't know if he's had a conflict. But I just wanted to point out to people that I sent you a message. I sketched up the report, my first idea is for a report outline and for a video outline. I want to put some more time into that myself because I feel like there's some sections where I'm like, I'm working on it. But this is how I saw the flow, and I am happy for people to comment or put adjustments or anything. Put suggesting mode maybe so we can see your thought, like whose thoughts they are. It doesn't really matter to me though. That's my slight preference. And a couple of things that I have not completed are, I just put all the theme labels in there. I did not organize them in any way. And I'm thinking I really need to think about a good picture or have other people propose good pictures. I think one of the next steps might be putting some really, I was going to say nice graphics, but I don't mean artistically beautiful graphics. I mean communicating structured type of graphics. And I think those might help us think. So I want this to be an iterative process now. I pitch in, like no matter how long you've been on the project. If you see something that you want to be different or that you think would speak to you differently or something that you want to say that isn't said in there, I think it would be great for you to just point it out. And it's very skeletal right now, so you won't do very much damage to these bones. I feel like my ideas on the video are less baked or less well baked than the ideas on the report. Not that that matters. You can jump into both of them. And then, so does anyone want to ask anything else before we go to the next thing?
I do.
Yeah.
I ended up like, so last week I had put in the chat, oh, we should go and see the videos for other programs. That was a brilliant idea. Went to the website. Narissima pointed out that none of the videos are actually working. They're a dead YouTube link. So I can't actually watch them, and that's kind of a bummer. I found a web page about NSF's Convergence Accelerator. And are we a convergence accelerator?
No,
Or
I don't think
are we
we're
just a
accelerator.
convergence? Okay.
We're a growing convergence research
Growing
project.
convergence.
I don't know what all these things are. I have seen the term convergence accelerator. I think it's a specific kind of funding mechanism. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Well, I'm glad if it's confusing for others that it is not just me being dense and not understanding all of the NSF ecosystem programs. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about what I think convergence is, but I also find it very confusing. Because we were involved in the sphere stuff long before, I did a lot of reading about what convergence should be and what team science is and all the stuff that they expect. And then I find that they use very little of it in evaluation. And
Yeah.
so I feel like it doesn't help that I know it or that I think or what I think it should be. Because the reviewers, like some of them are tuned into it and some are not, and they seem to be all taken equally seriously.
Well, I think that that actually helps. I think that even just the distinction for me in my mind right now around we are growing convergence research. It's the GCR program and not the convergence accelerator
Correct.
makes so much sense because I watched a convergence accelerator video and I was like, well, that none of what we're like, this is not the right fit.
Maybe that's why I never applied to it.
This isn't what we're doing, I don't think.
Mhm,
So I had
mhm.
that moment of panic.
Okay, well,
Okay, so, but this, yep, got it. All right. Just that having the framework again, going back to the framework, I feel like will really help me in being able to provide some feedback on the written report. If you're
yeah,
looking
so
for
one
me.
thing I
Okay.
can do, Stacy, is I can see if I can find the description of the call that we actually wrote to.
Okay.
There's usually a PDF document describing it
Mhm.
pretty vaguely, but that would be a thing for us to return to anyway. And then the other thing that I have never done and have had in the back of my mind for a long time is download all the reviewer comments and share them
Oh.
with the team. I have I read them myself and I was like so puzzled by them that I just didn't, I didn't even know it was worth talking about. Like I was like, oh, how did we get funded? Anyway, but so those two things I will do shortly, and I'll start putting these in like background information for the report.
Okay.
So I think over the next week, feel free to please make sure that you take a look at that. If you have ideas, go ahead and put them in. If you want to contribute a part, go ahead and put that in. I will tap people on the shoulder to help me do things. And me and Aaliyah put that report together. So everyone's going to be given tasks, but if there's something you feel motivated to do, or it feels like a thing that you want to share or write, please feel free to put your name on it. And I think another thing that came up for me was just how short that report is and how little time the video is to communicate all the stuff we've been doing. Like I was like, oh God, what are we gonna say? We haven't done anything, even though I know y'all are working very hard. That is not, but I've been feeling a little anxious because we don't have published product yet. But then and I do hope that we get to some submissions, but yeah, I feel like we will have a hard time covering all the bases in the space and time we're allotted. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I've asked Rayeedul and Zahra to show you a little bit of their progress on on the work they've been doing today. But I'm gonna I nudged them with a little bit of a challenge, and I'm gonna challenge everybody over the next few weeks. And probably we should always do this. It's really easy to present what you have been doing as something that's comprehensible to a colleague. But I want y'all to think about everybody else who's going to look at this and describe the context. Why are you doing this? Not just what did you do, but why is it important in the project? And try to describe it a little bit outside. So maybe a good analogy would, or a good context to think about is like a conference that's in your discipline, where you know the details. People kind of vaguely know the problem, but you're going to have to tell them quite a bit about why you're doing it in this way, and how it compares to what's been done before. And I didn't tell Rayeedul and Zahra to do all that background, but I did tell them to try to give context. And so view their presentation in that light and give them feedback on whether you understand it. And if you don't understand it, this is a kind audience, right? So it's a less painful way to discover that you are not communicating when you're among friends. So that they're on the hot seat today about that, but just really be open about saying what you don't understand, because if you don't understand it and you've been in these weekly meetings all this time, nobody else is going to understand it either. And I'll put the same challenge to everybody who presents for the next couple of months. So you're not alone. I think Kartik is coming up and Ellison is coming up. So. Okay, we didn't settle on an order. Is there one of you that wants to go first? Should I flip a coin?
Rayeedul go first, and then I give a brief overview of what I have done.
All right,
Sure. I'll take the first bullet.
you should be able to share.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Do you see my screen? Okay. So thank you all for the time. So today I'm going to give an update what I've been doing from a modeling perspective, trying to understand people's decision-making process in the context of heating system adoption process. So so the objective that I'm working on is to create an ABM model that is able to capture the heterogeneity in energy transition at household level. But the question arises, why am I doing this? What is something that we are trying to contribute to the state of the art research that other peoples have not done so far? So if we look at the literature, the general consensus is that the studies take a community at a time and consider them as a single entity and hypothesize some aggregated population dynamics, some rules of about how they take those decisions in the context of heating system adoption process. And based on that, they come up with a energy use projection. But that to me is like a hypothetical because you are aggregating those decision-making process. But what is our contribution, the respect contribution to the state-of-the-art research is that we disintegrate that bubble and take one of these households at a time individually. Each of those households are different, right? So we take them as a single entity, each of them, and try to come up with a population dynamics which is not aggregated, but rather scattered, but more granular information. And the ABM has the capability and the flexibility to take on all this integrated granular information, capture the interrelation between these different household, with also the socio-technical changes that households go through. And based on that, we are envisioning to come up with a data-driven energy use projection, which is different to what the other research have been doing so far in this context. And for now, we are just considering two particular agents, which is the occupant and building. We will take advantage of this agent-based model, what we have done so far, and take that as an extension to consider other agents as well in the future. But for now, we are considering occupant and building. And for occupant, we have a great rich database that Narsim and Kartik had provided us in the year. So we have the ability to integrate information about, say, what is the geographic location of that household, what is their income level, what type of heating system they are using. In case of building, we're using the Raystock data set. So some of the variables that Zahra and Tammy is working on is the building size, what is the vintage year, that will give us an estimation about the annual energy demand of each of those building characteristics. So with those interrelations or more granular information, our focus is to, for now, is to do a cost benefit analysis, a very simple but effective economic analysis that will give us an indication how people think about selecting different heating options. So I'll talk what are the steps or rules that we are trying to integrate into our modeling framework. So the first of all is that we are considering 1.5 million households in Colorado, and not everyone will think about what changes do they want to make in their household in the context of heating system. When they will get into that decision making threshold is that when their equipment reaches their life cycle. And that's when those particular household will get into thinking that what should I do in terms of heating system in my household. And then they will sit down and see that what is the cost associated with each of those available options. And it's very pretty straightforward based on the literature. So we are considering two different type of cost, fixed cost and variable cost. In the case of fixed cost is the installation cost. And for the variable cost, we have the maintenance cost and operating cost that will give us a total estimate of the total lifetime cost. But what happens is that the upfront installation cost, as we all know, is a very large amount of money, right? And people with different socioeconomic status perceive it differently. They will see that, okay, this is a large amount of some money, and this money is going to be depreciated in the future. So taking into consideration of this depreciation effect and also the total lifetime of each of these heating options, they will think about what is this worth to me in the present, and based on that they will make some calculation. And so but what the literature does is that when they calculate that depreciation cost, they consider a static income, like interest rate for all the households in the community. But that's not right? Like people from lower income people and higher income people, they will perceive it differently. For lower income people, they have limited capital availability, and they will feel that this is a large amount of money and this is going to be depreciated for me within a short period of time. So what the literature suggests is that the interest rate or depreciation, how they perceive the depreciation effect, will be different depending on each household's economic status. So we are integrating a dynamic consumer discount rate. So basically the discount rate will be different depending on different household, what economic status or spending power they are coming from. So based on that, they will do a lifetime cost. They will have a total cost for each of those heating options and choose the least cost option. And that's the current literature. That's where they stops. But as you can understand, this is more like a objective decision-making process. Like I have $100, I can spend $80. But there is also some objective decision-making process going on behind the fact. And that's where we come in. We try to converge research from other PIs in this project. We are trying to propose a realistic selection, not just the least cost selection, but the realistic selection of the heating system. What happens is that, let's say you have 5 options, you have 2 options, and the first heating system that will cost you, say, $10,000. And the second option will cost you $1,500. And the difference between them is $500, right? And that difference is perceived by different households with different socioeconomic status in a different way. And that's grounded in economic literature. Let's say, for example, people will think that look how this $5,000 will be perceived differently by lower income people and higher income people. Let's say they are influenced by some external factors. Again, we are thinking about from a subjective perspective. Say the fact that some external factors that okay, if I go with this heating system too, I may feel good that I'm investing in the environment. I'm contributing to the environment because the heating system too is more energy efficient. So I'll go with the heating system too. So that kind of fine balance is creating some dynamics in the decision-making process for different households. And maybe these external factors are influencing enough to, with the higher income household, come up with a solution that both options will look same to me. and I will go with the heating system option, although it is expensive for me, but I'm contributing to the environment. But lower income people will say that this 5,000 threshold is very significant to me. I will not take risk. I will rather stick with the least cost option. So that's something we are trying to integrate in the ABM model to portray realistic selection of the heating system based on what the different economists suggest. So that's basically the two rules that we are proposing. So just to give a background, what we are trying to say, the first we start with what are some of the available options we have in the market. Then we do some objective calculation that, okay, what is the lifetime cost associated with each of these options? And we also introduce a dynamic consumer discount rate that is differentiated based on different social economic status. And then we'll go into some subjective decision making process that some of the social psychological process that people go through that influences their decision when it comes to making changes at their household. So those are the two rules that we are trying to propose. Based on that, we will be able to say that this is not just a low cost selection we are trying to make, but a realistic selection of the heating system. And based on that, we'll be able to produce a data-driven household level heating system adoption process. But so this is kind of like a preliminary idea what we are trying to propose into our ABM model. But as you can understand, there are some things that I wanted to have feedbacks from you. Like, for example, this is some of the external factors that I have thought of by myself, but this is not what this is kind of like arbitrarily assumed external factors. So I was hoping to have feedbacks from other PIs, like for Chris has done interview, Tammy and Ellison has done participatory systematic, and Karthik and Narsima is working on the well-being characterization. So if we are able to come up with some different variables that are found to influence people's decision-making process in this context, we'll be able to create more realistic selection of this heating system. So that is the overall vision that I'm trying to put forward.
Awesome.
Thank you. Does anyone any particular question or suggestion?
So first, let's, with the theme of communicating to other people, are there things that people did not understand? Or
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for the presentation, Rayeedul. And I appreciate you going backwards in your slides. I think I followed to this point, and then on the next slide, I think is where you indicate what your rules are. If you wouldn't mind going to that slide. So I think something I wanted to understand is whether your rules integrate information other than price.
Yeah, that's a really good question. For now, I only have the information about like price, income, that kind of thing. But the what I feel excited about this methodology is that it's kind of like a modular system. So for now, we can run with just cost and price. But if we are being able to extract other information as well, we can take that as an input variable and plug that into this different, like this kind of like when you say realistic selection is like a utility function, whichever gives the most utility in terms of subjective feelings people will go for that. So once we have more information available from other sub-projects, we'll be able to integrate that information into this utility function and achieve our convergence over the time. So in that way, I feel excited. But going back to your question, for now, I'm just considering cost income.
Yeah.
Can you go to the
Maybe
next one, Rayeedul?
Sorry?
The next slide.
Okay.
Because I think one thing that's not really shown here in your rule 2 is that you're using this this comparison to indicate those systems that would be effectively the same in terms of price acceptability. But then there's the possibility to introduce other things like environmental attitudes there. Because once things are the same, how do you choose? We don't have that now,
For
But-
now, yeah,
but we're hoping that we will.
yeah.
Meaning you don't have the information to make a rule about if the price is the same or roughly the same. People like to make a decision tree that then proceeds from that information.
Right,
Okay.
we have not, there's lots of suspicions, and I think we are gathering lots of evidence, but that's not part of the program now. Is that right, Rayeedul? Am I getting it right? And then I'll shut up and let you talk.
Yeah, so like one of the factor can be like what is the relative cost, like cost divided by total savings, something like that. That info or cost divided by income. That can be a part of the utility function. And based on that, I'm running that rules too. But
Mhm.
we have further information. I'm hoping that, okay, Dr. Ellison is doing that review research paper, and maybe she will come up with the idea that, okay, these are some of the factors that I feel people are finding influence to their decision-making process, like thermal comfort, that we can integrate it on top of what have currently. Maybe Narsima and Karthik will have some information about that well-being metric. Okay, people, when they make changes, they feel some changes in this well-being metric, and then we can take that as an input and add to our utility function.
Yeah.
So that's kind of for my future vision. But for now, I'm running the model based on the idea that I only have the information between cost and income. That is one of the input parameter for that utility
Okay.
function.
I think the reason I'm asking is in thinking about the participatory system mapping, Tammy, like to my, at least, yeah, my first guess is that the part of that exercise where people are, and Rayeedul, you were there too, where people are, they've already put up factors, but then they're applying like barrier to, or accelerate, very important, not less, or important, but not as important. Like it seems like it would be worth, yeah, I know the spirit of PSM is to have things emerge from people without too much structure. But it seems like what you're looking for, Rayeedul, would be information on how people consider cost as being either interacting with other factors or being mediated by other factors. And that seems like information that could come out of the PSM exercise, but certainly didn't the first, try. That's what I'm thinking about. I don't know that I have a good question yet. I appreciate that you presented what you're doing at this level of detail, because I think it is spurring my thinking about the PSM work, but I don't know that I have a question yet. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
I have a
Rayeedul-
question about.
Oh, sorry, Stacey, gone.
I guess I have a question about the annual cost.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is like more of a question for the other research team members who have been talking with community members or people who have done upgrades in the home. something for me that, like, at least in my experience in talking with people in the community, and talking with the installers, is that they're not actually telling people the annual cost of what running these systems will be. Like, you can go to the store and you can look at a water heater, for example, and on the water heater it'll say, or on a refrigerator, it comes with a yellow tag, and that yellow tag says, here's what you could expect to spend on energy on this product if you install this product in your home. My experience is that those yellow tags do not come with HVAC systems. And so I've never been able to have, like, anyone say, well, this HVAC system is likely to cost you in these conditions this much per year to run. I think that it's a really important piece of information, but I also feel like it's really missing and hidden in many examples. But that's my experience. I'm wondering if that's bearing out in some of the conversations with community members, and I'd be interested in hearing Chris's take on that.
Yeah, the residents haven't really, that I've interviewed, they haven't really mentioned, they haven't really talked about what kind of costs are being incurred by the changes they've made. But one thing I was sort of thinking about during the presentation was how built into all of this is sort of the assumption that these changes are being made after, you know, an old system breaks down or reaches the end of life. And so far, and certainly this isn't generalizable, so I'm not suggesting anything beyond what I've experienced with the interviews, but some people are making these changes without that occurring, right? In other words, they're not waiting for something to break down. They just simply have reached the point where the system they have in place, and this is typically has been the swamp cooler, it's just reached a point of being too uncomfortable.
It's not working anymore.
And so so they've reached the point where you know, in some cases they just feel like it's not, again, not really that it's it was good at one point and now it's no longer good, or but really just the desire to, you know, have a house cool in every room rather than just one room, or a desire to not have to maintain and go up on the roof. And again, I don't really know how this fits into the model that well, but it's just one thing I was thinking about as I was looking at that very first slide.
I'm sort of hearing, like, price and cost being not necessarily the first consideration.
Well, and that's, it's interesting in that respect, because when I ask the question, what things do you consider when you're making a decision about making some sort of energy related change within the home, cost is the number one factor identified by far. However, when you ask them what prompted you to make the change, it wasn't cost, and it wasn't end of life. It was discomfort.
Chris,
Mhm.
I wonder, to follow up on that, it's funny, like, it's never occurred to me this way, but the way you put it, like, I don't know that cost is ever the driver. We don't really care to spend money. It's that we have some need that needs to be met. And then it's whether or not we have the money
The
to do
money's
it
there.
and other factors. I know that's simplifying, but do you think, like you said, cost is the number one thing coming up in the context of like making a decision, but would it be fair to say that it sounds like the driver that to make the change is not cost, but the ability to make the change does consider cost? It may be even only cost, or most importantly cost.
Right. They are definitely, you know, interconnected factors. It's certainly the case that the people who can afford to make the change are more willing to make the change. But that in itself isn't, you know, the ability to make the change in itself is not so far the cause that I'm finding in the interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
I think about
Oh, Tammy, I think we're having trouble hearing you.
maybe not.
Yeah, I'm having trouble too, Stacy.
Okay, I'll just wait.
Yeah, Rayeedul, I had a question about more on the implementation side. So for example, you know, on your slide 5, 4 or 5 or 6, for example, if we found out that people with environmental attitudes are more likely to make the change, how would you implement that? Like, would there be a probability associated with each agent, or?
So if we find that uh, being environmental conscious is kind of a significant variable, that we'll be able to integrate that to the utility function about how does the analytic formulation will look like, what will be the weightage for that variable. That's something I'll need to figure that out.
I see. So would it be like weighted over, like, I don't know, race, gender, income, all of that? You'll figure out some analytical formulation for how that connection is made, or?
Based on what the data says. If data says that we see those differences based on racial factor, then we can make that integration into the formulation.
I see. Okay. Thank you. And also similar question on slide number 3, like how do you make the connection between the building object and the occupant?
That's a good question. So it's kind of like, I'm not sure if like the technical aspect is that in the ABM model, I can say that given this amount of characteristics, connect. So they have a ACS Fusion data, they have a specific characteristics for the household, and the rest of data will be coming up with a specific data set. So I'll be working, I'm working with Tammy and Zahra to find that common level. Okay, what is the variable common between these two functions? If we have kind of information, we'll be able to map those information to each other. It can be, say, based on the Puma geographic location. It can be based on the house type, something like that. But I have not still made that mapping yet, but it should
Okay.
be.
Gotcha. So there's like another level of data fusion that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, maybe we should chat about that at a later stage, but yeah, it's just.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, and Zara, I'm sorry you're getting squeezed at the end, but maybe you can share a little bit about the building object, which is supposed to produce this cost that nobody nobody knows.
Can you see my screen? Hi everyone, I'll provide you with an overview of this building object and what it does and what's the progress with it. Before I go to the its operation and calibration stage, I give you a brief information about what is this building object exactly do. What I and Tammy envision for this building object is a tool to project energy demand of household on a household level, and later based on that operating cost for different buildings. And the input data comes from Restock that NREL released recently 3 versions of the Restock data sets. And we consider the most stable one, 2022, as our inputs. Exactly these data sets provide information about building on a household level, like housing characteristics, construction information, and also demographic information about occupants of this building. So it presents a lot of granularity about data we could use for building object to estimate energy demand and operating cost. Another thing that we consider as an input to keep with the dynamic nature of our estimation is using climate data, hourly temperature as outdoor input for our method that we use in building object energy analysis. So for building object, we get some information from user side and housing characteristics from Restock side, and weather data from available weather data that Energy Plus provided, a tool that for detailed energy analysis is used. User can provide PUMA information, building age and building type and area, and we could the building object knows a lot of information about building unit and a household level. So it can sample building units based on user request and extract all of those housing characteristics, like what type of construction material used and other information about occupant. At the first stage, we want to use this housing characteristic for estimation of energy demand, because it can later show us how operating costs work for household level. So we use a simplified method that cover all of this dynamic nature of energy demand calculation, but not that details that make a lot of problem for simulation and other calculations. At this stage, our building object now could estimate the energy demand for household based on the information provided, and our objective is to estimate the operating cost. And we also have some assumptions about if we should consider different building type, as it might influence the energy demand or the unit location, or if we should exclude some of these building like apartment unit that located in the middle of the building. So we haven't decided about these assumptions yet. And also we should consider which fuel price data set we could use for
Hey,
operating.
Zahra, I'm
Yes.
sorry you got squeezed on time, but because we're running up to the end, can you maybe not go into all the details, but just give us the main points?
Yes, just I go next slide. Before going to the next stage for operating costs, we should calibrate this output of the building object for energy demand, and we use the Restack energy consumption. It's a detailed calculation of the energy consumption for household, and we use basic cases like electric baseboard and furnaces, and then estimate energy demand based on the Restack and compare it with our outputs. So building object provide higher estimation, but it's not that far from Restack calculations. We decided to go forward with operating costs. So this is the progress on the building object. Any questions, any feedbacks? I'm open to that. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Zahra. And I can just add, we want to get heating demand for heterogeneous households. So that's the purpose. We've got all these different households. We just want a heating demand, and we're trying to leverage what's been done by DOE and NREC. And it's true that we're not matching it, and we've been puzzling about why. Like DOE has a estimate already. We've been puzzling about why we're not matching it. What we're doing is what a contractor would do. And so this gets back to the question, like, how important is operating cost really, and how well do people know it? Like, if even we can't match, like, so this very fancy modeling, I think people have put a lot of energy into building modeling, and then we're hearing from, I think both Stacy and Chris, that operating cost is not an upfront consideration, although it may become a consideration later on. And so I think, yeah, so from what Zahra has presented, I think we have something that I consider close enough to estimate that if it even matters. Anyway, questions and feedback for Zahra. Does everyone understand roughly what we're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm understanding is you're trying to estimate the cost on the operation side.
Yeah.
One thing I don't know that I understand is how you would rate the like richness of your inputs. Are you trying to estimate operation costs on the basis of limited information on purpose, or are you trying to get the best available and richest data? That's something I'm not sure. Maybe it was discussed, but I wouldn't be able to say. Does that question make sense?
I think so. Do you want to answer that, Zahra, and then I'll follow up?
About fuel cost, do you mean, Alison?
No, I guess I'm thinking more broadly, like sometimes, you know, a research aim might be to estimate an output on the basis of the least amount of information, or assuming that in the real world there's imperfect and incomplete information. And then sometimes I think research efforts are trying to say, we're trying to do the best to cover all possible inputs with the most precision and accuracy possible. Because that's also a valuable output, but it's a different output. And I don't know that I have a sense of where you think your inputs fall on the scale from like most real world, parsimonious, least needed information, or sorry, least amount and quality needs for information, or if you're on the more the richness, best available, most highly resolved inputs. I'm not sure that.
Yes, at least to me, not a comprehensive list of information is necessary for decision making at a household level. Like a more simplified view of the energy demand and other things could be more useful than something more detailed like the data provided in RESTAG. Like RESTAG is more detailed on energy estimations and other information. I don't know if this answered your question.
And I think to follow up on that, Ellison, I'd say we're in the middle.
In the middle, okay.
The most detailed one would be going to the building and getting a floor plan and
Right,
so we're obviously not there.
yeah,
The heterogeneity that we currently have in sampling from RESTAG is the building age, which makes a big difference in the energy consumption because it affects the code to which the building was built. The building location, because that also affects the codes. And I think NREL has done a really good job at parsing out what was built to what codes where. That's part of the reason we're using RESTAG, because that's just like a huge amount of navigation through decision trees.
yeah,
And so a location, and then there's some winnowing by size. And what we're trying to do is we're saying not all houses are alike, but for a general house of this general size in this climate zone, what is a range of houses energy use going to look like?
yeah. Okay, now that answers, I mean, that helps both of you and Zara help me understand better where those inputs fall kind of relative to the extremes and
And I think
norms.
one reason we're doing that is because there's probably some correlation between house age and location and some of the demographic or well-being metrics that we may look at later. So that's why we wanted to look at that. And the building cost or the operating energy may or may not go in the decision model depending on what we agree upon. But it's certainly going to go in the well-being model and how people's finances are affected.
Right. No, that's, yeah, good points all around.
We're running right up against 10 o'clock. Mountain, does anyone have final question? And please feel free to shoot them to Rayeedul and Zahra if you have ones that might take longer.
Thanks to both of them for the presentations.
Okay, thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Bye.